Hey guys, today I'll be talking about peer pressure. Peer pressure is something we can all relate to, and we have all been exposed to peer pressure. Have you ever laughed at a boring joke just because everyone else was laughing? Or felt the need to raise your arm to a question you perhaps disagree with? Some may say that peer pressure is an inevitable outcome of a society full of expectations, where people want to be like those around them. We listen to similar music, watch the same movies, and follow the same trend. On the other hand, some may argue that peer pressure is a simple matter of one's social context and the environment they live in. The topic of peer pressure is interesting for me, and I hope it is for you guys as well, because we are teenagers and we are learning to make decisions by ourselves. Now, enough with the introduction. Choosing the human sciences as my area of knowledge, I was thinking of how I could relate a specific way of knowing to the topic of peer pressure. And after a while, I came up with a knowledge issue of what role does emotion play in our decision making under peer pressure? To answer this knowledge issue, I came up with a claim that states emotion plays a significant role in affecting our decisions under pressure. To support this claim, consider an experiment conducted in 1953 by Dr. Ash that shows how powerful emotion can be compared to other ways of knowing, such as reason. In this experiment, the subject was put in a room with a bunch of other people and was told that he will be doing a vision test. He was asked a series of questions to pick which stick on the right best matched with the stick on the left. Now the catch was that everybody else in the room other than the subject was in on the experiment, and they were told to give obviously wrong answers. The surprising result was that 32% of people actually followed the wrong answers like B and C, even though they had no vision problems whatsoever. Now going back to my claim to the knowledge issue, the experiment perfectly supports that even though your sense perception, another way of knowing, tells you that A is the right answer, your emotion in fact tells you to adapt to the group and become a conformist. Although the Ash experiment supports the claim to my original knowledge issue, we can also see that emotion has led the subject to the wrong answer. This means that emotion can be seen as a negative and an unreliable influence on one's action. Now, this is where I formulated a counterclaim to my knowledge issue, which was that while it is true that emotion plays a significant role in our actions, reason is in fact a more reliable source of knowledge when it comes to you being peer pressured. To support my counterclaim to the knowledge issue, consider a picture where reason plays a bigger role compared to emotion. In an office meeting, the person in authority presents an idea. Now, even though their emotion tells them that the idea is awful, the employees' logical reasoning is that agreeing with their boss leads to a better impression and prevents them from perhaps being fired. And therefore, the employees ultimately conform to agree with their boss under peer pressure. Now, although in the picture we see the employees unwillingly giving in to their boss, some may still argue that emotion is more reliable than reason because employees should have their opinions. This is where the problem of balancing the ways of knowing comes in. When we have certain social and personal standards, it is often very difficult to know when to follow reason, emotion, or sense perception. We have seen in the Ash experiment that emotion outweighed sense perception, and in the office meeting picture we saw that reason had overcome the employees' personal emotions. Seeing the different types of ways of knowing used in different ways for a couple of situations where people are under peer pressure, I formulated a sub/derived knowledge issue. To what extent can we trust our emotion under peer pressure for decision making? To better understand this sub-knowledge issue, I decided to look at emotion in positive and negative types of peer pressure associated especially with teenagers. People often link peer pressure with negative things, but things like academic competition, athletic competition are two great examples of positive peer pressure where emotions of competitiveness and eagerness drive us to test our limits and go further. On the other hand, emotions such as depression and grief or anger may lead a teenager to give in to drugs, smoking, alcohol, etc. Now, going back to the sub-knowledge issue, I can state that the usefulness of emotion in determining our decisions may vary depending on whether or not the outcome is positive or negative. Personal experience. Now, let me tell you my personal story in response to my original knowledge issue. What role does emotion play in our decision making under peer pressure? When I first came to Osaka International School, I did not speak fluent English. I was peer pressured to understand the classes in English and keep up to date with English homework that were at times difficult for me. While the sense perception of speaking and listening to English were limited at the time, the emotions of being upset and being disappointed with myself gave me a stronger desire to improve my English. I felt that trusting my emotions had allowed me to overcome one of the most difficult challenges in my childhood, and as a result, I can say that personally that emotion in fact had a big role in my decision to improve my English level under a peer-pressured environment. Today we looked at the claim/counterclaim to the knowledge issue of what role does emotion play in our decision making under peer pressure, and the sub-knowledge issue of to what extent we can trust our emotion. In conclusion, emotion aids our learning process. It is important to utilize emotions under the guidelines taught to us through socialization, which includes peer pressure. Otherwise, we will just do things based on what makes us happy. Thank you for listening to my presentation.